The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, beamed across 300 light-years of empty space, and translated into every language on Earth within seconds. Humanity was invited to join the stars. In the underground bunker that served as the United Nations Emergency Council, Secretary General Maria Chun stared at the holographic display with tired eyes and a heavy heart. The aliens called themselves the Galactic Concord, a peaceful assembly of 47 spacefaring species who had watched humanity from afar for decades. They had waited, they said, for the right moment to extend their hand in friendship. The timing could not have been worse. Earth was still bleeding from the wounds of the collapse. It had started 7 years ago with the supervolcano in Indonesia, an eruption so massive that it blocked out the sun for 2 full years. Crops failed across every continent. Billions starved. Then came the plagues, diseases that spread through weakened populations like wildfire through dry grass. And when nations began fighting over the scraps of food and clean water that remained, the resource wars finished what nature had started. 3 billion people were dead. 3 billion more had survived, but survival had changed them in ways that could not be undone. Secretary Chun turned to face the council members gathered around the table. These were not the polished diplomats and silver-tongued politicians of the old world. Those people had died in their comfortable offices when the riots came, or starved in their luxury bunkers when the supply lines collapsed. The people who sat before her now were different. They were the ones who had refused to die. "The Concord wants us to send a diplomatic delegation," Chun said, her voice rough from years of breathing recycled air. "They expect ambassadors, cultural representatives, scholars of peace and cooperation." Defense Minister Yosef Ibarra let out a short, bitter laugh. "And where exactly are we supposed to find those? Our universities are rubble. Our museums burned. Our best minds spent the last 7 years figuring out how to grow potatoes in toxic soil. Then we send what we have," said a voice from the far end of the table. Everyone turned to look at Commander Ria Vasquez. She stood with her arms crossed, her dark hair streaked with gray despite being only 42 years old. Her face carried scars from the Jakarta rescue mission, where she had pulled survivors from collapsing buildings while volcanic ash rained down like black snow. Her hands were rough and calloused, the hands of someone who had spent years doing the impossible just to keep people alive. "The aliens want to meet humanity," Vasquez continued. "Fine. Let them meet the real thing. Not some fantasy version of who we used to be, but who we are now." Chun frowned. "Commander, these beings have never experienced conflict. Their worlds are stable, peaceful, abundant. They will expect refinement, culture, sophistication." "Then they will be disappointed," Vasquez replied without hesitation. "But they will also meet survivors. And I would rather show them the truth than send actors pretending to be something we are not." The room fell silent. Everyone knew she was right. Over the next 3 weeks, Earth assembled its delegation. The selection process was simple. They chose the people who had kept humanity alive. Dr. Samuel Okonkwo was a trauma surgeon from Nigeria who had operated on wounded patients during the worst of the resource wars. He had performed surgeries by flashlight in bombed-out hospitals, had learned to make medical tools from scrap metal, had saved thousands of lives with nothing but skill and stubborn refusal to let death win. When the power went out, he kept cutting. When the supplies ran dry, he improvised. He was not gentle or soft-spoken, but he understood suffering better than anyone alive. Yuki Tanaka was a nuclear engineer from Japan who had spent 3 years preventing reactor meltdowns across Asia after the collapse disrupted the power grids. She had walked into radiation zones that should have killed her, had solved impossible problems with failing equipment, had kept the lights on in refugee camps while the world fell apart around her. She spoke in numbers and solutions, not pleasantries and small talk. Lieutenant Marcus Webb was a former soldier turned humanitarian coordinator, a man who had seen the worst of the resource wars and then dedicated himself to rebuilding what the wars had destroyed. He had organized food distribution in war zones, negotiated ceasefires between desperate factions, buried friends, and kept moving forward because stopping meant dying. There were others too. Scientists, engineers, doctors, soldiers, farmers, all of them marked by the same hard edges and tired eyes. None of them had ever studied diplomacy. None of them knew the proper way to address an alien ambassador or which fork to use at a formal dinner. But all of them had stared death in the face and refused to blink. On the day of departure, Commander Vasquez stood before her team in the hangar bay of the hastily constructed spacecraft. They had named this Shepherd's Hope. The ship was ugly, a patchwork of salvaged technology and desperate innovation, but it would fly. That was enough. "Listen up," Vasquez said, her voice carrying across the metal chamber. "In 12 hours, we will make contact with alien civilizations that have never known war, never known famine, never known what it means to fight for every breath. They will look at us and see something strange, something rough, something that does not match their idea of what intelligent life should be." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Let them look. We are not here to impress them. We are here to represent the human race, and the human race is not a species of philosophers and poets anymore. We are survivors. We are the ones who made it through the fire. And if that frightens them, then maybe they need to be a little frightened." No one cheered. They were too tired for cheering. But heads nodded and spines straightened, and something that might have been pride flickered in exhausted eyes. The Shepherd's Hope launched at dawn, rising through the gray clouds that still choked Earth's wounded atmosphere. Below them, 3 billion survivors watched the tiny light climb toward the stars, carrying humanity's hopes and humanity's scars into the unknown. The Galactic Concord had asked to meet Earth's diplomats. They had no idea what was coming. Station Concord Prime was beautiful in a way that made Commander Vasquez uncomfortable. The structure floated in the darkness of space, like a sculpture made of crystal and light, its towers reaching upward in perfect symmetry, its surfaces gleaming with colors that had no names in any human language. Everything about it spoke of peace and abundance, of civilizations that had never known scarcity or struggle or fear. Vasquez did not trust it at all. The Shepherd's Hope docked at the station's receiving bay, and the human delegation stepped out into air that smelled faintly of flowers and something else, something too clean and too sweet. Waiting for them was a welcoming committee of alien beings that made Vasquez's survival instincts scream warnings. The Uri were tall and thin, their bodies covered in skin so delicate that light passed through it like morning sun through a curtain. Their bones were hollow, their limbs fragile, their movements slow and graceful like dancers in a dream. Ambassador Velthon stood at the front of the group, extending 3 long tendrils in what was clearly meant to be a gesture of greeting. Vasquez stepped forward and took the offered tendril in her hand, shaking it firmly the way she would shake any hand offered in friendship. Velthon made a sound like a startled bird. "I apologize," the alien said through its translator device, its voice trembling. "Your grip is quite strong." Vasquez released immediately, but she could see the damage was already done. The other aliens were staring at her with wide, fearful eyes, and Velthon was examining its tendril as if checking for broken bones. She had meant none no harm, had used what she considered a gentle handshake, but to these fragile beings, even that was too much. This was going to be harder than she thought. The welcoming ceremony proceeded awkwardly. The humans moved through the crystalline halls with a nervous energy that seemed to disturb their hosts. Vasquez noticed that her team kept scanning the environment the way soldiers scan a battlefield, noting exits and cover positions and structural weak points without even thinking about it. when a service drone malfunctioned nearby and crashed to the floor with a loud bang. Every alien in the room jumped and cried out in alarm. The humans did not react at all. Dr. Okonkwo had already assessed that the noise was not a threat. Tanaka had already calculated 3 possible escape routes. Webb had already moved his body between the sound and Secretary Chun. None of them had done this consciously. It was simply the way survivors behaved. The aliens noticed. The formal banquet that evening revealed even deeper differences. The humans sat at a long table surrounded by delegates from dozens of species, all of them gentle and peaceful and utterly unprepared for what they were about to witness. The food was exquisite by alien standards, carefully cultivated plants and synthetic nutrients arranged in artistic patterns. But when the humans pulled out their own rations, the mood in the room changed. "Is that," Ambassador Volthan asked slowly, "animal tissue?" "It is called beef," Lieutenant Webb replied casually, cutting into the preserved meat with his knife. "From a creature called a cow. We raise them for food." The Ori ambassador looked like it might faint. A nearby delegate from the Vin Republic actually did faint, collapsing onto the floor while its companions rushed to help. Other aliens stared in horror as the humans ate, watching them consume flesh with the same calm expressions they might wear while discussing the weather. "You eat the dead," whispered a creature from the far end of the table, its voice filled with something between fear and fascination. "You consume other living beings." "We are omnivores," Dr. Okonkwo explained patiently. "Our bodies require protein to function. On Earth, the most efficient source of protein was often other animals. We hunted them, raised them, and yes, we ate them. It is simply how our biology works." "But the violence," the creature protested. "The killing, the blood, the death. Does it not disturb you?" Okonkwo paused, considering the question. "There was a time when it might have," he admitted. "But that time was long ago. We have seen too much death to be disturbed by a piece of meat." The banquet continued, but the atmosphere never recovered. The humans tried to make conversation, tried to learn about their hosts and share information about Earth, but every new detail seemed to frighten the aliens more. When Tanaka mentioned that Earth experienced regular earthquakes, the delegates gasped. When Webb described the hurricanes that swept across the Atlantic each year, they whispered among themselves in panicked tones. When Vasquez casually referred to the volcanic winter as a rough period, Ambassador Velthon excused itself and did not return for an hour. Later that night, after the humans had been shown to their quarters, the Concord's leadership gathered in a secured chamber far from listening ears. Ambassador Velthon stood before a holographic display showing images of Earth, and its delicate body trembled as it spoke. "This world is classified as a Category 12 Deathworld," Velthon announced. "The classification scale only goes to 10. We had to create new categories just to describe it." The display showed footage of Earth's surface, volcanic eruptions that blotted out the sky, tidal waves that swallowed cities, predators with fangs and claws and venom, storms that could tear buildings from their foundations. The assembled aliens watched in silence, their faces pale with horror. "And these humans," Velthon continued, "are what survived. Not the gentle ones, not the peaceful ones, not the scholars or the artists. Those died. What came to us today are the ones that could not be killed. The ones their own planet tried to destroy and failed." A murmur of fear rippled through the chamber. "They eat flesh," someone whispered. "They heal from wounds that would kill us. They require almost no sleep. They can function in temperatures that would boil or freeze us. They are not diplomats." "No," Velthon agreed, its voice heavy with worry. "They are something far more dangerous. They are survivors of a world that should not have produced survivors. And now they are here." The chamber fell silent as the weight of those words settled over everyone present. Somewhere in the guest quarters, completely unaware of the fear they had caused, the human delegation slept peacefully for the first time in years, dreaming of a future among the stars. They did not know that some in the Concorde were already wondering if that future should be prevented. The days that followed were filled with what the Concorde called cultural exchange, but what Commander Vasquez privately called controlled observation. The aliens watched the humans constantly. They studied the way they walked, the way they talked, the way they reacted to stimuli that should have frightened any reasonable being. They took notes and recordings and biological samples, always with polite smiles and gentle words. But Vasquez knew the look of people trying to assess a threat. She had seen it in the eyes of warlords and survivors and desperate refugees all her life. These aliens were afraid, and afraid beings were dangerous. The humans did their best to ease tensions. They answered every question honestly, participated in every cultural event, tried to adapt their behavior to make their hosts more comfortable. But some differences could not be hidden. During a tour of the station's medical facility, Dr. Okonkwo accidentally cut his hand on a piece of equipment. The aliens rushed forward with their healing devices and emergency protocols, their voices high with panic. But Okonkwo simply looked at the wound, wrapped it with a piece of cloth from his pocket, and continued the tour. "The bleeding will stop in a few minutes," he explained to the horrified doctors. "The wound will close on its own within a day. There is no need for concern." The alien physicians stared at him as if he had grown a second head. Their species did not heal that way. Their wounds required immediate intervention, specialized treatments, weeks of recovery. The idea that a body could simply repair itself was beyond their understanding. "How is this possible?" one of them asked, scanning Okonkwo's hand with a device that made soft humming sounds. "Your cells are already generating new tissue. Your blood is already clotting. Your immune system is already fighting infection. This should not be possible." "On Earth," Okonkwo replied gently, "it is not only possible, it is necessary. Our world created many things that wanted to hurt us. If our bodies could not repair themselves quickly, we would not have lasted very long." The medical tour ended shortly after that. The alien doctors needed time to process what they had witnessed. The situation grew worse during the historical presentation. The Concorde had requested a summary of human history, hoping to understand these strange new beings better. Vasquez had tried to prepare a gentle version of events, but there was no gentle version of human history. The holographic display showed images of Earth through the ages, wars that killed millions, plagues that swept across continents, natural disasters that reshaped entire landscapes. The aliens watched in stunned silence as scene after scene of death and destruction played before their eyes. There was the Black Death, which had killed a third of Europe in a few short years. There were the world wars, conflicts so massive that they had been given numbers instead of names. There was the climate crisis that had raised seas and burned forests. And there was the collapse, the fresh wound that still hurt to remember. "How many times has your species nearly gone extinct?" asked Councillor Metra of the Vin Republic, its voice barely above a whisper. "At least a dozen times by natural causes," Vasquez answered. "Many more by our own actions. We have come close to destroying ourselves more times than I can count. And yet you survived." "We always survive." Vasquez shrugged. "That is what we do. The universe throws its worst at us, and we adapt. We endure. We find a way forward even when there should be no way. It is not pretty, and it is not gentle, but it is who we are." Metra turned to look at its fellow counselors, and something passed between them that Vasquez did not like. A silent communication, a shared concern, a decision being made without words. After the presentation ended, the human delegation was escorted back to their quarters with even more guards than before. Vasquez noted the change immediately. The guards were not there to protect the humans. They were there to watch them. That night, in a chamber hidden deep within the station's core, the Concorde's Emergency Council convened in secret session. The atmosphere was tense, the faces grim, the voices hushed. "They cannot be controlled," declared High Chancellor Pri of the dominant coalition, its tentacles writhing with agitation. "They cannot be predicted, cannot be contained, cannot be trusted. They come from a world of violence and death, and they carry that world within them. They have shown no aggression," Ambassador Volthan protested weakly. "They have been cooperative, even friendly." "For now," Pri replied. "But what happens when they decide to stop being friendly? What happens when they want something we will not give them? These are beings who have survived extinction events, who have fought wars that killed billions, who eat the flesh of other creatures without remorse. Can we truly believe they will remain peaceful forever?" Murmurs of agreement spread through the chamber. "Consider their biology," another counselor added. "They are stronger than us, faster than us, more durable than us. They require less sleep, less food, less care. They heal from wounds that would kill any of us. And there are billions of them on that Deathworld, all of them shaped by the same brutal forces. If they ever decide to expand, to conquer, to take what is ours, how could we possibly stop them?" The room fell silent. Everyone knew the answer. They could not stop them. No one could. "Then, we must act now," High Chancellor Pri declared. "Before they grow stronger. Before they learn our weaknesses. Before they decide that friendship is less useful than domination." "What are you proposing?" Volthan asked, though its voice suggested it already knew. "An accident," Pri said coldly. "A tragic malfunction during their return journey. The universe is dangerous, and sometimes shuttles fail. No one would blame us. No one would even know." The vote was called. One by one, the council members signaled their agreement. Even Volthan, after a long and painful hesitation, added its support. The risk was simply too great. These humans, these survivors of a Deathworld that could not be controlled, had to be stopped before they became a threat that could not be stopped. In their quarters across the station, the human delegation slept peacefully, unaware that their hosts had just voted to kill them. Commander Vasquez dreamed of Earth, of the fires and floods and wars that had shaped her into who she was. She did not dream of betrayal. But betrayal was coming anyway. The diplomatic shuttle launched on a clear morning, with no warning of the disaster to come. Commander Vasquez sat near the front of the vessel, watching through the window as Station Concorde Prime grew smaller behind them. The past week had been exhausting, filled with endless meetings and careful conversations and the constant feeling of being watched. She was looking forward to returning to the Shepherd's Hope and getting some rest. She never got the chance. The explosion came without warning, a sudden burst of fire and noise that ripped through the shuttle's engine compartment and sent the vessel spinning wildly through space. Alarms screamed. Lights flickered and died. The artificial gravity failed, sending everyone floating in the darkness. "Report!" Vasquez shouted, grabbing a handhold to steady herself. "Engine is gone." Tanaka called back from somewhere in the chaos. "Navigation is gone. Life support is failing. We have maybe 2 hours of air left." "Where are we?" "Approaching an uncharted moon. If we can guide what is left of this shuttle, we might be able to crash land on the surface." Vasquez did not hesitate. "Do it?" The next 30 minutes were a nightmare of desperate improvisation. Tanaka rerouted every bit of remaining power to the maneuvering thrusters while Webb and Okonkwo secured the wounded and prepared for impact. The shuttle hit the moon's surface hard, bouncing twice before skidding to a stop in a field of gray ice. Silence fell. "Is everyone alive?" Vasquez called out. One by one, the survivors answered. Miraculously, no one had died in the crash. There were injuries, broken bones, and deep cuts and bruises. But Dr. Okonkwo was already moving through the wreckage, treating the wounded with calm efficiency. The situation was desperate. The moon's atmosphere was thin and toxic, filled with ammonia that burned the lungs in temperatures that would freeze exposed skin in minutes. The shuttle's hull was cracked, its systems failing, its distress beacon silent. No one was coming to rescue them. "They did this on purpose," Webb said quietly, examining the remains of the engine. "This was not a malfunction. These are explosive marks. Someone planted a bomb." Vasquez felt cold rage settle into her chest, but she pushed it aside. There would be time for anger later. Right now, there was only survival. "Tanaka, can you get heat from the reactor?" "The reactor is damaged, but yes, I can rig something. It will not be pretty, but it will keep us warm." "Okonkwo, medical status?" 3 serious injuries, 6 minor. "I can stabilize everyone, but I need supplies and time." "Webb, I need you to organize salvage. Everything that might be useful, pull it from the wreck." The survivors moved with practiced efficiency. They had done this before, on Earth, in the dark days of the collapse when every day was a fight for survival. They knew how to work together, how to prioritize, how to turn disaster into something they could live through. Within hours, they had established a base camp inside the shuttle's cargo bay. Tanaka had converted the failing reactor into a heat source, keeping the temperature inside just warm enough to survive. Webb had salvaged food, water, medical supplies, and construction materials from the wreckage. Okonkwo had treated the wounded and organized a rotation system to ensure everyone got rest. But surviving the first night was only the beginning. The days that followed tested them in ways even the collapse had not. The ammonia storms came regularly, howling winds that shook the shuttle's hull and filled the air with poison. The temperatures dropped so low at night that ice formed on the walls despite Tanaka's heating system. Food ran short, water ran shorter, and the wounded recovered slowly. But the humans adapted. Vasquez organized hunting parties that ventured out onto the frozen surface, searching for anything that might be edible. They found strange creatures living beneath the ice, things with too many legs and no eyes, and after careful testing, they discovered that some of them could be eaten. It was not pleasant, but it was protein, and protein kept them alive. Tanaka improved the heating system again and again, finding new ways to squeeze efficiency from the dying reactor. Okonkwo learned to treat frostbite and ammonia burns with improvised medicines. Webb built traps and shelters and tools from scrap metal and frozen mud. On the 6th day, something appeared on the horizon. "Vessel approaching," Webb announced, watching through a gap in the shuttle's hull. "Concord design. Probably a search party. Or a confirmation team," Vasquez said grimly. "Coming to make sure we are dead." She was right. The rescue shuttle landed 100 meters away, and a team of Concord personnel emerged wearing environmental suits. They moved cautiously toward the crashed vessel, clearly expecting to find corpses. What they found instead made them freeze in their tracks. The humans were standing outside the shuttle, battered, scarred, wrapped in improvised cold-weather gear made from salvaged insulation, but very much alive. They stood in the ammonia wind with their backs straight and their eyes hard. Survivors once again of conditions that should have killed them. Commander Vasquez stepped forward, her voice carrying across the frozen plain. "Tell your masters we got their message. Tell them we understand what they tried to do. And tell them this: Earth has been trying to kill us for 200,000 years, and we are still here. They will have to try harder than a faulty shuttle and a cold rock." The rescue team stared in silence, their faces pale behind their helmets. Then one of them, a young pilot, whose hands would not stop shaking, turned on the communication link to Station Concord Prime and spoke a single sentence that would change everything. "They are not dying. They are thriving." Back at the station, the council members heard those words and felt something they had not felt in centuries. They felt afraid. The humans had been betrayed, abandoned, left to die on a frozen wasteland that should have killed any living thing within hours. And they had not only survived, they had built shelter, found food, treated their wounded, and prepared to wait as long as necessary for rescue that might never come. The council had tried to murder them, and they had simply refused to be murdered. Now the humans were coming back, and no one knew what would happen next. The Grand Assembly Hall of Station Concord Prime had never been so silent. Representatives from all 47 member species filled the circular chamber, their bodies pressed together in rows that climbed toward the distant ceiling like steps on a great staircase. Holographic displays projected the scene across 1,000 worlds, where billions of beings watched with held breath and trembling limbs. At the center of the chamber, standing on a platform that had been designed for gentle diplomats in flowing robes, was Commander Ria Vasquez. She still wore the improvised cold-weather gear from the frozen moon, patched and stained and rough against her skin. Her face was weathered from 6 days of ammonia winds and freezing temperatures. Her hands were bandaged where frostbite had taken its toll. Behind her stood the rest of the human delegation, equally battered, equally unbowed. They looked like survivors because that was what they were. 2 weeks ago, Vasquez began, her voice filling the chamber through the translation systems. We came to this station in peace. We came because your Concord invited us, because you wanted to meet humanity, because you hoped to build a friendship between your worlds and ours. She paused, letting the words settle. 3 days ago, you tried to kill us. A ripple of shame passed through the assembly. Many delegates looked away, unable to meet the humans' eyes. High Chancellor Pre, who had organized the assassination attempt, sat frozen in its seat with its tentacles coiled tight against its body. Your bomb destroyed our shuttle over an uninhabited moon. You left us stranded in an atmosphere of poison, in temperatures that should have frozen our blood, with no supplies and no hope of rescue. You believed we would die quietly, and you believed no one would ever know what you had done. Vasquez's voice grew harder. You were wrong on both counts. She stepped forward, and despite themselves, the delegates in the front row shrank back. This small, scarred human woman radiated something that none of them could name, something ancient and fierce and absolutely unafraid. We did not die. We built shelter from wreckage. We made heat from a broken reactor. We hunted creatures beneath the ice and ate their flesh to stay alive. We treated our wounded with improvised medicine and slept in shifts to keep watch for dangers. We did what humans have always done when the universe tries to kill us. We refused to give up. She turned slowly, making eye contact with delegates across the chamber. You fear us. I understand that. We come from a world that should not have produced intelligent life. A world of earthquakes and volcanoes and hurricanes and predators and plagues. Our history is written in blood. Our survival is a miracle that should not have happened. We are not like you, and that difference frightens you. Her voice softened, but did not weaken. But here is what you failed to understand. Vasquez took a deep breath and continued. Earth did not send us because we are her best. She sent us because we are her survivors. And on our world, that is the same thing. The gentle ones died in the collapse. The peaceful ones starved in the famines. The delicate ones froze in the volcanic winter. What remained were people like me, people who had been tested by forces beyond imagining and refused to break. She gestured to her team behind her. Dr. Okonkwo saved lives in bombed hospitals while buildings collapsed around him. Yuki Tanaka walked into radiation zones that should have killed her to prevent disasters that would have killed millions. Lieutenant Webb buried his friends and kept fighting because giving up meant more people would die. These are the humans who survived our Deathworld. These are the ones Earth trusted to represent her among the stars. Vasquez's eyes found High Chancellor Pre. You saw monsters. You saw threats that needed to be eliminated before they could spread. But you made a mistake. You judged us by what we endured instead of by who we chose to become. She spread her hands. We did not come here to conquer you. We did not come here to dominate or destroy or take what is yours. We came here to join you, to learn from you, to share what we know and discover what we do not. We came here because surviving alone is not enough anymore. We have learned that lesson the hard way, written in the ashes of our cities and the graves of our dead. Her voice rose. The galaxy is dangerous. You know this. You have lived in peace for so long that you have forgotten. But deep in your histories, there are records of catastrophes that nearly destroyed you. Asteroids and plagues and solar flares and threats from the darkness between stars. You survived because those threats were small or rare or far away. But they will come again. The universe is not kind, and it does not care about your comfort or your safety or your peace. Vasquez pointed directly at the assembly. When that day comes, when something terrible emerges from the void and threatens everything you have built, you will want allies who know how to survive. You will want friends who have faced extinction and refuse to die. You will want humanity standing beside you, not because we are gentle or peaceful or refined, but because we are the ones who know how to fight and keep fighting when all hope seems lost. She let the silence stretch. We are not your enemies. We are your greatest potential allies. We are the survivors of a death world that could not be controlled, and we came here in peace despite everything that has happened. The question now is not whether you should fear us. The question is whether you are wise enough to accept our hand in friendship before it is too late. Commander Vasquez extended her hand, palm up, toward the assembly. Choose. The silence held for one heartbeat, then two, then three. Then Ambassador Velthon rose from its seat and moved slowly down toward the central platform. Its delicate body trembled with every step, but it did not stop until it stood before Vasquez, looking up into her scarred face with eyes that held something new. Not fear, hope. Velthon extended its tendril and placed it gently in Vasquez's hand. On behalf of the Galactic Concord, the ambassador said, its voice carrying across the silent chamber, I apologize for what was done to you, and I accept your offer of friendship. One by one, across the assembly, other delegates rose. Not all of them, not yet, but enough. Enough to begin. Vasquez closed her fingers carefully around Velthon's tendril, gentle this time, mindful of its fragility. Then let us start again, she said. 50 years later, when the Devour Swarm emerged from the darkness beyond the galactic rim, humanity stood on the front lines beside their alien allies. The creatures were vast and hungry and utterly without mercy, a threat that the Concord had never imagined and could never have faced alone. But they were not alone. They had the survivors of Earth fighting beside them. And together, they refused to die.